Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Benuck. Today's show is one part of a two-part show called the Governor's Council Face-Off, in which we'll talk with the two contenders in the race for Governor's Council District 4, that very small but powerful group that kind of officially is known as the Executive Council. My guest today is Chris Pappas, and he is the Democratic nominee for the slot. And Chris is the owner of the popular Puritan Backroom restaurant in Manchester. He has served as the Hillsborough County Treasurer. He also served as a member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives. Now, I'm not going to use our valuable time today to repeat all of that information that I gave you in my previous interview with Chris about his biography and many accomplishments. And in that show at the beginning, I also kind of explained a little bit about what the Governor's Council is and what they actually do. So I'd really like you to watch that show to get up to speed and again to be able to review Chris's considerable background. It is on the BCTV website, www.bedfordtv.com. You would go to channel 16 and video on demand in the search box, Tell It Like It Is. The shows come up and you'll see it. Race for the Governor's Council with Chris Pappas. But I'm going to make it even easier for you. Instead of going through all that and all the clicks and all that and pages, if you want to send me an email, a direct email, and it will be on the screen, feel free, and I'll send you a direct link to the show, and that'll save you a lot of time. Okay, so with no further ado, the candidate is here, Chris Pappas.
Kathy, great to be here again.
Good to see you.
Thanks for having me by.
Yeah, I imagine you are all over the place, all over the landscape, a big region to cover.
There are, 19 communities in the district,
Yeah.
about 250,000 people. It's 20% of the
Yes.
state, and there are so many folks to get introduced to
Yes.
and to talk to about the issues at play this year. And I've had a lot of fun doing it, actually. Some people ask me if you must be so tired from the grueling campaign, but it's been a pleasure so far. And the more I get out there and meet people and hear from people, the more I get excited, not just about running, but about serving. Because I think this position is just so significant.
It is.
Not to just how state government functions, but to making sure each constituent has a voice in government and making sure each constituent can get what they need in terms of answers from their elected officials and from department heads who are unelected, but who are selected and work with the council on a close basis. So I look forward to making those connections with people over the next few weeks left of the campaign and being a voice for the next 2 years for the constituents in this district.
People have no idea how grueling it is being a candidate, but it's also fun. It's an experience that, win or lose, you never forget.
It is. There are varied activities.
Yeah.
You're doing door-to-door, you're making phone calls,
Yeah.
you're out in parades, marching in these old home day
Hopefully
parades.
not in the rain.
We actually didn't have any rain for any
Wow,
of the
you
parades
were
this year. Yeah, we lucked out. But it's been a pleasure, and the people of this district have been great.
Well, I know you've been an active campaigner because I keep seeing pictures of you and hearing you've been here, there, and everywhere, and I'm seeing your signs everywhere, so obviously you have a good campaign staff out there, too.
We're working hard at it.
Yeah.
We've got a full-time campaign manager, got a great crew
Huck.
of
Yeah.
volunteers.
Yeah, Matt Huck, and he's a good guy.
Yeah, and the support we've gotten has been incredible. We have over 1,000 donors now to
Wow.
our campaign.
Wow,
so it's a
that's
real
impressive.
broad-based effort.
Yeah.
And we've reached out across the aisle and have many supporters who are Republicans. Just this week, we're going to release a list of some significant Republican support from across the district.
Super, good for you.
And I think that's important because when you're elected, you're not just elected by the 50% plus one. You really
Right.
have to represent 100% of the people in this district.
Right.
And there are varied opinions, varied philosophies about the role of government, and you've got to do your job to meld those all together and really represent everyone. So I look forward to doing that, and I think the broad-based grassroots effort that we've developed over this campaign is going to allow me to really respond well to folks the next 2 years.
Sounds great. Well, let's get to some issues.
Sure.
How do you think, and this is an opinion obviously, how do you think that the council has handled so far this whole nepotism related scandal at the Department of Employment Security, and then of course on top of that we're all learning now about several irregularities with the New Hampshire Liquor Commission? I mean, I know both issues aren't over, but how do you think they've done so far with this?
I think the council has done a fairly good job, and the oversight powers of the council are quite significant.
Yes.
When a councilor picks up the phone and calls a department head, they call back immediately because they know the role of a councilor is just so significant. They can get the answers that other folks in government and other people around the state can get from department heads. And so I've appreciated the role that Ray Wazorek has played not just in these couple circumstances, but over his 10-year career. I think he's done a real good job of getting the right answers, asking tough questions, and really looking into issues when they need to be looked into. In terms of, you brought up nepotism, I think that's always a significant issue when you look at government and folks that have the ability to hire and fire folks.
Sure.
And I'm pretty satisfied with the way that issue has been handled. I know the legislature has decided to look into it a bit, and the speaker has wanted to set up sort of some independent body, to examine the situation. I think we have an executive council for a reason, and it's to play that sort of an oversight role. And so I think anything that the speaker would want to set up would really be redundant. I really think that the power lies with the council, and the ultimate responsibility of ensuring that our state department heads are acting according to the law and acting appropriately rests with the council.
I think that's such a sensitive issue with employment security because of the fact that so many people desperately depend on it when they lose their job. And I mean, on occasion, there are reasons why people aren't approved right away, or when they get knocked off, they're desperate. And I think just a lot of people were just like, wow, this is just so wrong.
Yes.
that a layoff would be kind of arranged in order to have a relative be able to collect.
But I think you have to look beyond the headlines too, and I think there's a lot more to the case.
There's always more to a story
than just the charge of nepotism. And I know that Commissioner Pappas has moved over from labor to employment security, has done an incredible job in bringing that department back together and trying to reorganize things in a way to prevent anything like that from happening again, but also to heal some of the wounds that existed there. There have been several commissioners over the last decade that have served there, have appointed their own folks to positions in employment security. And so making sure those people are working as a team has got to be job number one. I think Commissioner Pappas has done a great job doing that. That's why he was renominated and hopefully will be reconfirmed to another term.
And that, would create an internal morale problem as well, because when people get angry, they tend to get angry at everybody who works for an agency.
That's right. I mean, as a small business owner, I know that.
Oh, yeah, you know that.
You've got to foster teamwork. You've got to foster cooperation. And when you have different folks in government working in different directions, ultimately they're working against the best interests of the people of this state. And so that's a challenge every business owner faces, certainly one that I face at a restaurant with 230 employees.
Sure.
Personnel issues
if a server is rude to a customer or whatever, who's the customer mad at? The restaurant.
Absolutely. Or if a server is rude to another server, or the cook, certainly.
There you go.
That causes
not
some
a good
issues.
thing.
And so, cutting back on that sort of internal strife and making sure people are working in the same direction and working together, that's got to be, one of the most important things that commissioners should insist upon members of their department. And I think Pappas is doing a good job doing that. And I think folks with business experience like mine know that that's a challenge and something I'm going to focus on going forward.
Okay. Now, in your opinion, what do you think right now is the biggest problem with state government?
I think the biggest problem has been, for the past year and a half, an ideology that I would call extreme that's been imposed on people in New Hampshire. And I think that anytime you get folks that come to the table and want to work on their own ideological considerations before they want to look at what's best ultimately for the state, I think that is shortchanging the needs of the voters. And so I think we've seen extremism in the legislature, and we've seen it on the council too in some of their votes. We saw the defunding of Planned Parenthood health centers in New Hampshire. There had been a 30-year non-controversial contract that had provided real critical health services to women and families, cancer screenings, preventative care, annual exams, birth control. And that contract had never been debated. There had never been an issue with it in the past. But we got 3 counselors this year who raised concern over that contract because of what has become a national movement to defund and delegitimize Planned Parenthood. And the ultimate losers in that weren't necessarily the people on the other side of the political spectrum. They were the folks that depend on Planned Parenthood for their health services. 20% of women in this country at one point in their lives will receive health services from Planned Parenthood. And the vast majority of those services are critical care, cancer screenings, as I mentioned, that keep these women healthy and leading productive lives. And so I think the mission of Planned Parenthood is one that we should be supporting. And at the end of the day, we've got to put ideology aside and making sure that we're doing what's best for constituents.
Now, you had brought that up during at the very end, in fact, of your last interview with me, when I said to you, is there something we didn't talk about? And you brought that up. So I consequently did today plan on asking you a little bit about that. So it's good that you brought it up. I guess, kind of two things I'm curious about. Now, getting back to the Planned Parenthood question. Certainly people argue that cutting funding to them would hurt people who are going there for health care, the mammograms, the Pap test, and all the rest of it. But then you have, other people who go, yeah, they offer it, but it is their belief, and whether it's true or not, I don't know, and I'm sure somebody keeps statistics on all this, but in a lot of people's mind, their primary business is abortion. Now, again, and it's in people's minds. I'm not saying that as a fact, certainly, but knowing that that is a perception of people and kind of turns it into a sticky, wicked issue for some people, not all people, obviously. Knowing that there are other programs in the state that are state funded, that do provide some of those same services at very low cost or even no cost. I'm thinking particularly like mammograms and such. What would be the big deal if some of the money that goes to Planned Parenthood would instead go to better fund some of those groups?
Well, there are certainly other providers out there and other people that receive state money to provide such care.
Right, right.
When you look at Planned Parenthood, less than, I believe, 5% of their actual spending and actual health procedures touches anything related to abortion, and that money is segregated. We have something called the Hyde Amendment that exists at the federal level that makes sure that federal money doesn't go to financing abortions. And so this money was very strictly going to be used for the procedures and the health services that I mentioned before. And I think that Planned Parenthood is one organization. There may be others out there, but they have, bid on this and they have received a state contract, just like other groups out there will bid on, a contract for state services. And so, they've gone through the process. There hasn't been an issue in the past. And even though the perception might be there that this is the case or that people have a moral issue, really this is funding that's going to critical care, cancer screenings, and really there should be no issue with folks when it's providing a need for a critical population.
Well, apparently there hasn't been an issue in New Hampshire, so I'm wondering if some of that reaction this year might have come from some of these tapes that made it on TV that were in states far away from here, that got strong reactions from people, and maybe that kind of carried over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to get people excited, especially those that have, deep concern about a particular issue.
Sure.
And certainly I respect the beliefs and opinions of those who, don't support a woman's right to make her own reproductive health choices. But I don't think that should be part of this debate. I really think that's a separate issue.
Okay. Now, did any of that get restored since then?
Yes,
it did. I thought so,
the federal government actually, redirected the money to the Planned Parenthood centers.
Okay, so they budgeted at the same level at this point?
Yes, and but there were several months where thousands of folks that were seeking those services went without them.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Now, if you are elected, which you'll know in just a few more weeks, do you have some specific goals that you would like to achieve and get achieved?
Yes. First of all would be to put ideologies and agenda aside and focus as best we can on growing the economy and creating jobs.
Okay.
I think anytime we're distracted with political issues and partisan issues, we're not doing what we need to be doing to focus on what small businesses need and what working families in our state need. Second would be what I mentioned earlier too, about cooperation. And I really think it's got to be bipartisan cooperation. I think Governor Lynch has done a pretty good job the past 8 years forging bipartisan bipartisan consensus as much as he could within state government. It's resulted in some great folks from both parties serving as State Department heads on the judiciary and on boards and commissions. And I think that's got to be the model for us going forward. We've got to work across party lines if we're going to solve the challenges that face New Hampshire in the long term. These are health-related challenges, educational challenges, infrastructure challenges. These shouldn't be partisan issues, really. In order to move our state forward, we've got to work across the aisle, and that's something I'm committed to do.
Now, if you win, and there's one more governor's council seat up in this election, right?
Well, all 5 are up, but actually
okay.
there are 2 seats where there aren't incumbents running, and this is one of them.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I guess most of us go on the assumption that the 3 incumbents are probably going to win. There doesn't seem to be any major reason why they wouldn't, but who knows? I mean, it's never
you never know. That's
things.
Right.
But assuming those 3 stay the same, even, you know, if both you and your fellow Democrat in the other district win, you're still going to be in the minority, you know, 3-2. And who knows which way the governor's race is going to go. But if a Republican wins, if over LaMontagne wins, and you have a Republican governor and a Republican majority on the council, do you think that that's going to hamper you? Or do you think that you can still work the way you want to work?
I absolutely think I can. You know, my first term in the legislature was under Governor Craig Benson and with a large Republican majority in the House and Senate. And I was on the Ways and Means Committee that year, worked very well with, you know, all the Republicans that were on the committee and built some great relationships that still enjoy today. When I was on the Finance Committee, my second term in the House, the Republicans still controlled the legislature and worked under some great Republicans, including Fred King from the North Country, who was chair of the committee. And these folks weren't ideologues. I mean, they were moderates by and large. They were folks that really, at the end of the day, you could get together with and you know, talk about policy, talk about issues, and there wasn't a lot of conflict there. I think the situation in Concord has changed quite a bit the last several years. I think to a degree both parties have become polarized, but I think it's really, you've really seen it with Speaker O'Brien and the way he's run the House. And it hasn't just been about ideology, it's been a level of nastiness that really just doesn't belong. There's been retribution. You've heard a candidate in Bedford use the word vengeance, you know, against his opponent's campaign manager. I really think that's a sorry comment on the state of politics.
I've actually heard a couple of versions of that story, though, so I don't know.
Maybe there's another one. That's the one that was reported in the
I know.
Leader.
That's the one that made the paper.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. And obviously when it makes the paper, you know, that's the one out there.
Yeah. So, you know, as I was saying, have a very good relationship with Republicans. And I think the fact that this week I'll release, you know, 50 Republican supporters of my effort to win this seat, I think shows that there are Republicans across this district that see me as a bipartisan consensus builder.
Well, I mean, I think, and I like to think that I don't vote the party, I vote the person. Now, I mean, I realize a lot of people, no matter what, they'll vote the party lines on both sides, Dems and Repubs. But, you know, my husband and I have voted for the people we liked. And in my lifetime, I have been a Democrat, I have been a Republican, and I have been an independent.
You've done the trifecta there.
I have, yes.
But, and the biggest voting bloc in New Hampshire, obviously, are independent voters. And that's the bloc that's growing the fastest. And so I think you've got to address that big group in the middle. And that's where my message is targeted.
Say, I think every candidate's thinking that way these days, yeah. Yeah, you have to, really. Now, even though the Governor's Council obviously has a humongous amount of power, you know, all things considered, it seems like a lot of people pay absolutely no attention to it for whatever reason. I mean, sometimes some people don't even know what Governor's Council is or Executive Council. Why do you think voters should be aware of it, particularly this year, and particularly aware of the activities that they'll be involved in?
I think a lot more people are aware of the role of the council this go-round than they have been in past years. And it's
why? Because of high-profile issues?
I think there have been some high-profile issues, including the Planned Parenthood issue, including the vote to block the study of passenger rail for the Greater Manchester area, including some votes on you know, the Affordable Care Act and the role of state government in providing you know, health care to folks around the state. And so that's raised the profile of the council in a way that I think is probably a good thing. But in the long run, we can only have a successful council and a successful state if we try to turn some of the votes on those issues around and get the ideology out of things and really be working for the best interests of our state. I go around the district and talk to folks, and a lot of folks aren't really aware of the significance of the council. And I think there are a lot of people that have come to the southern tier from Massachusetts, from other states that don't have an executive council. And Massachusetts has a governor's council, but doesn't wield the same kind of power that ours does.
It's more a figurehead type thing. It's almost like a group of people who sort of get rewarded for being political activists, I think, more than anything.
That's right. And so part of this campaign has been giving a little bit of a civics talk to folks out there who aren't either aware or just have some more questions about why exactly the council is important. So there's that education piece that has to happen. And I think when there's a good executive counselor in office, folks like Ray Wazorek and Ray Burton, I think, have done a good job with constituent service.
Yeah,
I think that elevates.
Yeah, they're both noted for that.
That elevates the profile of the council, and I'd hope to both be able to offer that type of constituent service and go around to schools, to community events, and to other places to be visible and to talk about why the council is important.
That'd be a good thing. Now, I had not planned on bringing up Commuter Rail because we did discuss it, in the first interview, and I know you said you are supportive of it. But since you did mention it, I think a couple of things just in the past 2 weeks that we've seen. I mean, just a few days ago, in all the news was the fact that a lot of folks in Nashua are very serious about this and are really forming a coalition to revive the whole idea, despite the council kind of not accepting those funds.
Sure.
And then the other thing that I think kind of jumped off the pages at me were the new numbers for the number of passengers using Manchester Airport. And I mean, obviously there's been a big drop. Now, again, some of that's because of the economy. Some of that is because of the fact that there are less flights, which is an airline-wide kind of thing. But some of it is also because people are not choosing to use the Manchester Airport. And a lot of people have always said that put in rail and it will benefit that airport. Do you think that that's something now that will get people to take a closer look at the whole issue?
I hope so, and my support for rail is really just in studying the concept of it.
Right.
I think the jury is still out on whether or not ultimately it's a viable long-term solution for our state. I think we've got to look at a multimodal system of transportation. We've got some great bus lines that are running in the state with state support that have done quite well, moving commuters in and out of the southern tier. We have a great new facility at Exit 5 that's running folks down to Boston that really is doing a good job meeting the needs of commuters.
We've actually used it ourselves to get to Logan. And it was very handy.
Sure. The airport has some long-term challenges to face. It's an economic engine of this region. We've got to make sure the airport is well supported because there are hundreds of millions of dollars in economic benefits to the greater Manchester area by having the airport here. There are some trends in the airline industry going to smaller planes. Low-cost carriers have gone into Boston now, and those impacts have reduced ridership at Manchester Airport, unfortunately. And you know how it is. You go online, you shop by price. Maybe the cheaper flight is out of Boston and not out of Manchester, so you might fly out of that facility. And so there's a lot more competitiveness now, especially with JetBlue and Southwest flying out of Boston, than there ever had been. And so the airport faces some challenges, and I think developing a transportation system for the future that's going to integrate Manchester Airport, whether it be bus service or rail, is definitely important to look at. We've spent significant money, state and federal money, putting an access road into that airport, but it would be a shame if there weren't customers coming up that would want to use it. And so working as closely as we can with local leaders and leaders at the airport is important. We can't ignore the airport because, as I said, it's an economic engine, and in order for this region to be strong, we've got to have a strong airport, and that means leaders supporting it, but also developing infrastructure around it that will make it easier for folks to use it.
So maybe you'll be able to have some good dialogue if you're elected with your fellow council members.
And I think, as with anything, it's about getting the right folks into the room to make decisions and work collaboratively.
Believe it or not, we're kind of in the end zone.
Really?
I know, it goes by so fast. So what I want to do is, if there is another subject that I didn't hit that is really near and dear to your heart in this campaign, I want you to bring it up. But I really want you to be able to have the remaining time to spend it on your candidacy, why people should vote for you, what you can bring to them, how you differ from your opponent, whatever it is you want to say. It's your camera, go to it.
Sure. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for having me by again. I mean, this is a great service for voters in Bedford. I'm sure you're quite busy interviewing everyone you need to talk to in this campaign.
Just glad you could make it.
So thanks for doing it. And thank you for watching, too. This is an important election. Every election is important, but this one's quite significant because I believe the future of our great state of New Hampshire is at stake. We've got to make sure that we put agendas aside and can come together and work in one direction to make sure we build a brighter future for folks in New Hampshire. That's what I'm committed to doing. I'm up against an opponent who is a great guy, and I've spent a lot of time chatting with him. He succeeded me as county treasurer in Hillsborough County, but I believe we have different visions for the future of our state. He was the most extreme candidate to come out of the Republican primary and defeated two others by criticizing them for being too moderate or not being too conservative. And I think when folks can't win a Republican primary because they've lent their support to Democrats in the past, or maybe have some moderate views on some issues, I think that's a shame. I think we've got to come to the middle in this campaign and beyond and work together as closely as we can to make sure we work in the mold of Governor Lynch and move New Hampshire forward. You know, I'm committed to working across this district and listening to everyone and making sure I represent people's views accurately and providing good constituent service to the folks in this district. As a restaurant owner, I know the customer is always right, and dealt with some tricky situations with clients at my restaurant and vendors and employees. And I feel that that experience has given me a great skill set to bring in terms of representing constituents and dealing with your issues before state government. This has been a pleasure to be a candidate for this office, and I really look forward to serving the folks of this district the next couple years. I really feel that for our long-term health needs, for infrastructure needs, and really to be able to work together in a bipartisan fashion, that I'm the best candidate for this job. So I thank you, Kathy, for, again, having me on the show. I hope to be back here in the future as an executive counselor and be talking with the voters about the issues that are at play in state government.
That sounds good.
And refer people to the website, too. It's pappas2012.com.
Yes, I was going to say that. And I think it seems to me the last show we had your tweet information and everything else up on the screen, didn't we?
Sure.
You want that back up again?
We can do that,
folks?
And folks can go to the website, too, and you know, you can link to the Twitter and Facebook page there. The social media is going nuts these days.
Especially with the, you know, a younger age.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, the good thing, exciting thing about this race is that you know, Councilor Wazorek is sort of at the end of his political career, decided to retire, and you know, Bob Burns is, I believe, 34. I'm 32. So we're going to have some young blood, no matter what the outcome is.
That there are some similarities between the two of you. You both have your own businesses. You're both young. You both served as county treasurer. Some of your views are even a little parallel. And it's kind of interesting, watching the two of you competing against each other for a variety of reasons.
It's great, you know. It's good to get young people into the process.
Absolutely.
And you know, as someone told me on the campaign trail, you have more experience than you know, a lot of very seasoned politicians. I've served, you know, 2 terms in the legislature, 2 terms as county treasurer. You know, been involved in the family business for 10 years.
You're bringing some background to it.
So I think those experiences really will allow me to hit the ground running. I mean, I know the players and the structure of state government, and I think I really have my ear to the ground from my business background as to what businesses and working families in this district need.
Well, I'm sure there are folks who listen to you today, watching the show, who may want a sign in their yard, or who may want to jump in and make phone calls or whatever for you. So by looking at your website, there's contact information there if they want to.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. We've got over 1,000 signs already up on lawns across the district. Yeah, we've got a bunch more to get up, though. So people can contact me through the website. I'd appreciate it.
Great. All right. Well, we are out of time. I want to thank you for coming. I know your schedule's off the wall. And best of luck as you go forward with the campaign. And happy trails to you, as the saying goes. And to everybody who's watching the show. Again, another wonderful candidate. You know, we're really lucky this year. We have some really important races. And what a great volume of excellent candidates we've gotten to meet and hear this year. Some outstanding people have stepped up and taken on the challenge of running for office. And here's one of them. So, thank you for watching. As it is, we always want to tell it like it is. We had yet another candidate do a really good job of that. You do it too. And until next time, bye-bye.